late afternoon sun poured through the suburban neighborhood, casting long shadows on the park where children laughed and played. Daniel adjusted his rearview mirror, his heart racing as he parked discreetly across the street. His wife, Rachel, was at the park with their two young children. It was one of their routine play dates, or so she claimed. For weeks, Daniel had felt an unsettling tension in the air. Rachel had been unusually cheerful lately, her smile a little too bright, her laughter forced. "It's just stress from work," she had assured him when he questioned her late nights out. But her excuses never sat right with him. That afternoon, something urged Daniel to follow her. A sense of dread gnawed at his chest as he trailed her minivan down the familiar streets to the park. From the safety of his car, Daniel watched Rachel unload their kids and escort them to the playground. She waved them off with a quick smile before making her way to a bench near the tree line. Then he saw him. A tall, fit man with an air of smug confidence approached Rachel. His posture was relaxed, but his movements deliberate, as if he owned the very ground he walked on. Daniel recognized him from the neighborhood but had never interacted with him directly. The man was Mark, someone Rachel had casually mentioned once or twice. Mark greeted Rachel with an embrace that lingered just a second too long, the kind that spoke of intimacy beyond casual acquaintance. Daniel's pulse quickened, his grip tightening on the steering wheel. He grabbed his phone and began recording. Through the lens, he captured the stolen glances, the whispered words, the way Mark's hand briefly touched Rachel's back as they talked. It was a betrayal in motion, unfolding before his eyes. A gust of wind carried laughter from the playground, and Daniel's focus shifted to his children. His son Alex was scaling the jungle gym with determination, while Emma, his younger daughter, twirled in circles near the swings. They were blissfully unaware of the storm brewing in their parents' lives. Rachel and Mark's conversation ended abruptly. She glanced toward the playground, as if ensuring the kids were still occupied. Mark nodded, then walked back toward his car. Rachel returned to her bench, her smile fading as she stared at the ground. Daniel's mind raced. The evidence was undeniable, yet his emotions were a chaotic blur of anger, heartbreak, and disbelief. How could she betray their family? How long had this been going on? And most importantly, what could he do to protect his children from the fallout? As the sun dipped below the horizon, Daniel started his car and drove away, careful not to attract attention. He had seen enough for now. The confrontation could wait. His priority was his children and ensuring they had a safe, stable future. Daniel sat at the edge of his bed that night, the dim glow of the side lamp casting shadows on the walls. His mind replayed the scene from the park like a broken film reel. Every detail burned into his memory. The stolen glances, the lingering touch, the laughter that seemed too personal. The room felt suffocating. He opened his laptop and began a deep dive into Rachel's digital life. Rachel wasn't careless, but she wasn't meticulous either. As he scrolled through their shared accounts, something struck him. A series of frequent transactions at a cafe far from their home, one they'd never visited as a family. His heart sank further when he noticed corresponding charges at a nearby boutique hotel. With a shaky breath, he grabbed his phone and began texting his old college friend Mike, now a private investigator. Daniel explained the situation briefly, his fingers trembling as he typed. Within minutes, Mike called. "Are you sure about this, Dan?" Mike asked, his tone grave. "Once we go down this road, there's no turning back." "I'm sure," Daniel said, his voice firm despite the lump in his throat. "I need to protect my kids, Mike. I need the truth." The next few days were agonizing. Daniel went through the motions at work, but his mind was elsewhere. At home, Rachel's demeanor was as cheerful as ever, her interactions with him almost mockingly normal. The sight of her laughing with the kids, acting as if nothing was wrong, ignited a mix of anger and sadness within him. A week later, Mike delivered the evidence. Daniel met him in a quiet diner on the outskirts of town. The envelope Mike handed over felt heavier than it should have, laden with the weight of its contents. Daniel hesitated before opening it, bracing himself for the worst. Inside were photographs, timestamps meticulously noted. Rachel and Mark at the cafe, their heads close as they shared whispered conversations. Rachel entering the boutique hotel, her hand brushing against Mark's arm. The final blow was a picture of them holding hands as they walked through a quiet park trail far removed from the children's playground. "You've got everything you need here," Mike said softly. "It's damning evidence." Daniel nodded, unable to speak. His heart felt like it was being crushed. But beneath the pain was a simmering determination. This wasn't just about betrayal anymore. It was about ensuring the safety and stability of his children. That evening, Daniel sat in his car outside their home, clutching the envelope. Through the living room window, he could see Rachel reading a bedtime story to Emma. Her voice was soft, melodic, as Emma giggled and cuddled against her mother. The sight twisted a knife in Daniel's chest. When Rachel finally came downstairs, Daniel was seated at the dining table, the envelope lying unopened before him. She stopped in her tracks, her cheerful expression faltering when she saw his grim demeanor. "Is everything okay?" she asked, her tone laced with caution. "Sit down, Rachel," Daniel said, his voice devoid of emotion. Her eyes flicked to the envelope, then back to him. She hesitated before taking a seat. "What's going on?" Daniel slid the envelope across the table, his gaze unwavering. "Open it." Rachel's hands trembled as she pulled out the photographs, her face drained of color, her confident facade cracking under the weight of her guilt. She opened her mouth to speak, but Daniel cut her off. "Don't," he said coldly. "Don't insult me by trying to lie." Rachel looked down, the silence stretching between them. Finally, she whispered, "I didn't mean for this to happen." Daniel's jaw tightened. "It's what they all say, isn't it? You didn't mean for this to happen, but it did. And now, our kids are caught in the middle of it." Tears welled up in Rachel's eyes. "Daniel, it doesn't change how much I love them. How much I—" "You love them?" Daniel's voice rose, his pain turning to anger. "You love them, yet you use them as a cover to sneak around? What kind of mother does that?" Rachel was silent, her head bowed. The weight of her actions seemed to finally settle on her shoulders. Daniel stood, his chair scraping against the floor. "I've already contacted a lawyer. This is going to court, Rachel. And I will do everything in my power to make sure the kids stay with me." Rachel's sobs followed him as he walked upstairs, leaving her alone with the evidence of her betrayal. The courtroom was colder than Daniel had expected, the sterile air thick with tension. He sat at the plaintiff's table, his lawyer, Megan Harper, a seasoned family attorney, flipping through a neatly organized file. Across the room, Rachel avoided his gaze, her once confident demeanor replaced by a palpable unease. The weeks leading to this moment had been grueling. The royal had been confrontation. Rachel had swung wildly between defensive anger and tearful apologies. She claimed her actions didn't define her as a mother, insisting the children's well-being had never been at risk. Daniel, however, couldn't reconcile her words with her actions. If she truly cared about the kids, why had she dragged them into her lies? The custody battle had begun with depositions. Daniel sat across from Rachel in a sterile conference room as lawyers on both sides asked invasive questions. Megan had coached him thoroughly, ensuring his answers were calm, honest, and focused on the children's welfare. Still, every moment felt like walking on a razor's edge. Sir Carter, Rachel's attorney, a sharp-suited man named Blake Donovan, began, "Isn't it true that your work often keeps you late? That Rachel has been the primary caregiver for your children?" Daniel's stomach churned. "Yes, my job has demanding hours," he admitted, his voice steady. "But I've adjusted my schedule to prioritize my kids. I work from home more often now, and I've always made time for their activities." Blake's smirk didn't waver. "But during your marriage, wasn't Rachel responsible for most of the day-to-day parenting tasks?" "She was," Daniel conceded, his gaze flickering to Rachel. "And I appreciated her for that, but being physically present doesn't excuse dishonesty or putting our children in harmful situations." Rachel flinched, her composure faltering for a moment. Blake moved to redirect, but Daniel's words hung in the air. Daniel's next step was gathering character witnesses. His parents and close friends submitted affidavits attesting to his dedication as a father. Emma's teacher spoke glowingly of Daniel's involvement in her school projects, while Alex's soccer coach praised his consistent support at games. Each piece of testimony added weight to his case, painting a picture of a committed, loving parent. Rachel, too, called witnesses, though their impact was less compelling. Her friends spoke about her involvement in playdates and family outings, but none could explain away the evidence of her affair or the neglect implicit in her actions. When asked directly about the affair, Rachel avoided eye contact, offering vague justifications that left the courtroom uneasy. The children became a pivotal focus. To minimize their exposure to the conflict, a court-appointed child psychologist, Dr. Linda Hayes, conducted evaluations. Daniel's heart broke when he learned of the sessions, knowing his children would have to navigate questions about their feelings toward their parents. Dr. Hayes' report, however, was a turning point. In her findings, she noted that both Alex and Emma expressed a strong bond with their father. They described him as attentive and caring, a source of stability. Conversely, Rachel's inconsistent behavior had left them confused and, in Alex's case, angry. The psychologist recommended that Daniel be granted primary custody with visitation rights for Rachel. As the court proceedings continued, Rachel tried a new tactic: manipulation. Daniel received a late-night call 1 week before the final hearing. Rachel's voice, laden with desperation, filled the line. "Yeah. Daniel, please," she pleaded. "This doesn't have to get uglier. Think about the kids. They need both of us." Daniel's grip on the phone tightened. "You're right, they do. But they need us in ways you haven't been, Rachel. They need honesty and stability." Rachel's voice cracked. "I made a mistake, but I'm still their mother. And I'm still their father," Daniel replied, his tone firm. "I'm not doing this to hurt you, Rachel. I'm doing this to protect them." She hung up without another word, leaving Daniel staring at the darkened screen. He knew he'd done the right thing, but the guilt gnawed at him. Despite everything, he hadn't wanted it to come to this. On the final day of court, Daniel walked in with his head high. Megan had prepared him for every scenario, but the weight of the moment was unavoidable. He watched Rachel take her seat, her face a mix of defiance and regret. The judge entered, and silence fell. Both lawyers presented their closing arguments. Blake tried to paint Rachel as a devoted mother who had made a single regrettable mistake. Megan, however, focused on the facts: Rachel's betrayal, her use of the children as a shield, and the psychologist's recommendation. When it was Daniel's turn to speak, he rose and addressed the judge directly. "Your Honor, I'm not here to punish Rachel or take my children away from their mother. I'm here to ensure they have a safe, stable environment to grow up in. They deserve better than lies and uncertainty." Rachel's shoulders sagged as his words landed. For the first time, she seemed to grasp the consequences of her actions. The judge's ruling came swiftly. Daniel was awarded primary custody, with Rachel granted supervised visitation until she could demonstrate consistent, responsible behavior. The weight lifted from Daniel's shoulders was tempered by the ache of seeing Rachel's tears. This wasn't a victory, it was a necessary step to rebuild his family's foundation. That evening, as Daniel tucked Alex and Emma into bed, Emma looked up at him with wide, innocent eyes. "Daddy, is everything okay now?" Daniel smiled, brushing her hair back gently. "It will be, sweetheart, I promise." As he closed the door to their room, Daniel allowed himself a moment of quiet relief. The battle had been hard, but his children's future was worth every step. Now, it was time to focus on healing and building a life where they could thrive. This section emphasizes the legal and emotional struggles Daniel faces, highlighting his determination to protect his children while navigating the courtroom drama and Rachel's attempts to regain control. "Let me know if there's another aspect you'd like to explore further." Rachel Carter sat in her small, sparsely decorated apartment, staring at a half-empty glass of wine. The walls, once filled with family photos, were now bare, the echoes of laughter and love replaced by a suffocating silence. Her reflection in the darkened window showed a woman she barely recognized. Her usually polished appearance was marred by exhaustion, and her once confident eyes looked hollow. It had been weeks since the judge's decision. Rachel had lost not only custody of her children, but also the respect of the community she had been so proud to be part of. The whispers followed her everywhere: at the grocery store, the salon, even the park where her betrayal had first unfolded. Her lover, Mark, had vanished the moment things started to unravel. He had been charming and attentive when things were easy, but when Rachel's life fell apart, he disappeared without so much as a text. The sting of his abandonment was a harsh reminder of her choices. She had gambled everything: her marriage, her children's trust, her stability, and lost it all. Meanwhile, Daniel was adjusting to life as a single father. His days were a whirlwind of school drop-offs, soccer practices, bedtime stories, and work. Though exhausting, he found solace in the routine and the closeness it brought with his children. Alex, his eldest, had taken on a more protective role within the family. At 10 years old, he was old enough to understand what had happened, though he rarely spoke about it. One night, while Daniel was tucking him in, Alex asked quietly, "Dad, will Mom ever come back home?" Daniel hesitated, searching for the right words. "Your mom loves you, Alex," he said carefully. But sometimes adults make mistakes that take time to fix. For now, this is our home and we're going to make it the best one we can. Emma, just 6, processed the situation differently. She missed her mother but clung to Daniel with an intensity that broke his heart. Every night she would crawl into his lap during story time, her small hands gripping his shirt as if afraid he might leave too. "Daddy, you're not going anywhere, right?" she asked one night, her voice trembling. Daniel hugged her tightly. "I'm not going anywhere, sweetheart. I'm right here." Rachel's supervised visits were another source of tension. The court-appointed monitor, a stern woman named Judith, ensured the visits adhered strictly to protocol. Rachel arrived at the community center early each Saturday, armed with snacks and toys, hoping to win back her children's affection. But the visits were strained. Alex was polite but distant, his answers clipped. Emma was more forgiving, but even her innocent smiles carried an undercurrent of uncertainty. Rachel tried to engage them, but the weight of her actions hung heavy in the room, an invisible barrier she couldn't break through. One Saturday, as the visit was ending, Rachel knelt in front of Alex, holding his hands. "I'm trying, sweetheart," she said, her voice cracking. "I'm trying to be better." Alex pulled his hands away, his eyes brimming with tears. "You should have tried before, Mom," he said, his voice steady but filled with pain. "You should have tried when we were all together." His words hit Rachel like a punch to the chest. She watched as he walked to Daniel, who stood waiting near the door. Emma hugged her goodbye, her small arms wrapping around Rachel's neck briefly before she, too, ran to her father. As the door closed behind them, Rachel sank into a chair, tears streaming down her face. Judith, ever professional, handed her a tissue but said nothing. Rachel knew she had a long road ahead to rebuild the trust she had shattered, but the path seemed impossibly steep. Outside the community center, Daniel loaded the kids into the car. Alex stared out the window, his jaw set in defiance, while Emma chattered about her favorite cartoon. Daniel glanced at his son in the rearview mirror. "You okay, bud?" he asked gently. Alex shrugged. "I just don't get why she did it," he said after a moment. "Why she messed everything up." Daniel's grip on the steering wheel tightened. "Sometimes people make bad choices, Alex," he said, his voice calm, "but those choices don't define who you are. What matters is how we move forward." Rachel's isolation deepened as the months went on. Her old friends had distanced themselves, unwilling to be caught in the fallout. Even her family was wary, offering sympathy but little support. She threw herself into therapy, hoping to make sense of her actions and find a way to rebuild her life. Her therapist, a no-nonsense woman named Dr. Peterson, didn't let her off the hook. "You have to own what you did, Rachel," she said during one session. "You can't rebuild trust if you're not willing to take responsibility." Rachel nodded, though the weight of those words felt crushing. She had spent so long justifying her actions to herself that facing the truth was almost unbearable. Meanwhile, Daniel's life began to stabilize. His focus on the kids paid off as their laughter returned to the house, slowly replacing the silence. He joined a local support group for single parents, finding camaraderie and advice from those who had walked similar paths. One evening, after putting the kids to bed, Daniel sat on the couch, scrolling through photos on his phone. Pictures of family vacations, birthday parties, and lazy Sunday mornings brought a bittersweet smile to his face. He paused on a recent photo of him with Alex and Emma at the park, their smiles wide and genuine. Despite everything, they were healing. As Daniel closed his eyes, he thought about the future, not the one he had planned, but the one he was building. It wasn't perfect, but it was honest, and for the first time in a long while, that was enough. This expanded fourth part explores Rachel's descent, her attempts to reconnect with her children, and Daniel's journey toward healing and stability. It focuses on emotional depth, character growth, and the impact on the children without repeating earlier elements. The morning sun streamed through the kitchen window of Daniel's home, bathing the room in a warm glow. Emma giggled as she helped Daniel whisk pancake batter, her tiny hands gripping the handle of the bowl. Alex sat at the table, scrolling through his tablet but sneaking glances at the commotion, a faint smile tugging at his lips. It was a simple scene, yet it held a profound significance, a testament to how far they had come. Months had passed since the custody battle ended. Life was far from perfect, but there was peace now, a stability that had been missing for too long. Daniel had made the conscious decision to focus on creating a home filled with love and honesty for his children, ensuring they always felt safe and valued. On weekends, Daniel took the kids on small adventures. They explored local hiking trails, visited museums, and indulged in spontaneous ice cream runs. These outings weren't just about keeping them entertained, they were about building new memories, ones that weren't overshadowed by the pain of the past. One Saturday, as they sat by a serene lake, Alex threw a stone across the water, watching it skip before sinking. "Dad," he said, breaking the silence, "do you ever think about Mom?" Daniel paused, choosing his words carefully. "I do," he admitted. "She'll always be part of our lives, and it's okay to miss her. But we have to focus on the present and the good things we have now." Alex nodded, his expression thoughtful. Emma, sitting beside them, leaned against Daniel's shoulder. "I like it when we're together like this," she said softly. "Me too, sweetheart," Daniel replied, wrapping an arm around her. Meanwhile, Rachel's life had taken a different turn. Her therapy sessions continued, and though progress was slow, she began to confront the reality of her choices. The weight of guilt was a constant companion, but it motivated her to take steps toward redemption. She reached out to Daniel, not with excuses, but with a genuine desire to co-parent effectively. "I know I can't undo what I've done," she wrote in an email, "but I want to be better for the kids if nothing else." Daniel was hesitant but agreed to a meeting at a neutral location. Over coffee, they discussed boundaries and plans for the children's future. Rachel listened more than she spoke, acknowledging his concerns without defensiveness. For the first time in years, there was a sense of mutual understanding, however fragile. Back home, Daniel found a renewed sense of purpose. He had joined a local community group for single parents, where he shared experiences and offered support to others navigating similar paths. The connections he formed there became a source of strength, reminding him that he wasn't alone. Through the group, Daniel met Claire, a school counselor with a warm smile and an easy laugh. Their friendship grew gradually, built on shared experiences and mutual respect. Claire was patient and kind, never pushing but always present. When Daniel finally introduced her to Alex and Emma, the kids took to her immediately. Emma loved her knack for crafting, while Alex admired her ability to explain complicated science concepts in ways that made them fun. One evening, after dinner, Claire joined them for a family board game night. As laughter filled the room, Daniel caught her eye and smiled. In that moment, he realized he wasn't just rebuilding a life for his children, he was allowing himself to find happiness. The turning point came on a quiet Sunday morning. As Daniel sipped his coffee, Emma brought him a handmade card. Inside, she had drawn their family, with Claire included, and written in her wobbly handwriting, "I love our new family." Daniel's throat tightened as he hugged her. "I love it too, Em," he whispered. Rachel, though absent from their daily lives, continued to visit the children under supervision. Over time, these visits became less strained as she demonstrated consistency and effort. While Alex remained guarded, Emma's natural warmth began to bridge the gap between them. Slowly, the fractured bonds started to mend. For Daniel, this was a bittersweet victory. He didn't want to exclude Rachel from their children's lives. He only wanted what was best for them. And as he watched her attempt to rebuild her relationship with the kids, he felt a flicker of hope, not for their marriage, but for her as a mother. On a crisp fall evening, Daniel sat on the porch, watching Alex and Emma play in the yard. Claire joined him, handing him a mug of tea. "You've done an amazing job with them," she said, her voice full of admiration. "I couldn't have done it without them," Daniel replied. "They gave me the strength to keep going." Claire smiled, resting her hand on his. In the distance, the children's laughter echoed, a melody of resilience and renewal. For the first time in a long time, Daniel felt at peace. The past had left its scars, but it had also taught him the value of love, honesty, and second chances. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky in hues of gold and purple, he knew one thing for certain: they were going to be okay. Together, they were writing a new story, one of hope, healing, and a brighter future. This final part emphasizes healing, growth, and a hopeful future without repeating earlier sections. Let me know if there's anything you'd like adjusted.